A question I have been asked literally hundreds of times by Colombians since I moved to Colombia 12 years ago is, why did you move to Colombia when you come from Australia? And Australia is considered to be a very well-developed country with a good economy, job opportunities, a safe lifestyle, very good quality of life. But a lot of Colombians are confused with my move. They ask me, why would I move to a developing country like Colombia? And I'm going to answer that question and many, many others in this video. I'm going to try to keep it short as possible, but full of information. Be sure to stick around to number one. For my dear Australian viewers, number one's going to sting a little, so I apologize for that in advance. Let's get into it. These are my top 5 reasons for why I choose to live in Colombia at this point in my life, and I'll answer if perhaps I would return to Australia someday. Now, first of all, let me just say I am and always will be a very, very proud Australian. Even if I do someday get a Colombian citizenship as well, I will always be Australian at heart. As you can see by my Australian flag here on the wall behind me, I'm very proud of my country and I love it very much. Just because I choose to live abroad does not mean I don't love my country. It's just that I want to be able to explore the world and experience everything that life has to offer while I'm still young enough and able to do so. But someday in the future, I'll probably return to Australia. Who knows? But I digress. No matter what country you are from, if you are considering moving to a more developed country such as the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and many others, I'll also be asking you some questions that might help you decide if it really is the right decision for you. Because trust me, from someone who has lived in both Japan and Colombia, adjusting to different cultures is not easy. Now, in this video, I'm obviously talking about my own personal experiences, so yours may vary, of course, but I just wanted to go over some of the typical challenges you might face and offer you some tips to make living abroad easier for you. And I will answer the question, is the grass really greener on the other side? Let's get into it.
If you love this kind of video, please subscribe and come along with me on my future adventures.
So here are my 5 top reasons for living in Colombia instead of Australia at this point in my life, and some of them may apply to you who may be living in other countries around the world. Starting off with number 5, a balanced lifestyle. Life here in Colombia can feel a little more slower paced, depending on what city you live in, of course, but also a little more connected. People in Colombia tend to value spending more time with family and friends, and there's a real focus on enjoying the present. I often see Colombians celebrating with their friends and family, and partying is a really big part of Colombian culture. You will see and hear parties all year round, and that's not such a bad thing unless you don't really like lots of noise, because there will be a lot of noise, but it's just so great to see people having such a good time. Moving to Colombia has taught me to really slow things down and learn patience, because things do happen at a different pace here. If you don't learn patience, you're going to have a lot of frustration because things are just done differently here. In contrast, life in Australia is a little more fast-paced, which can be very convenient, but it can also be very stressful, especially when working in corporate work environments, which is something that just is not for me. No offense to anybody that does that. I'm just more of a relaxed person that doesn't enjoy high-pressure work environments. So I think it's important for you to ask yourself, what kind of lifestyle do you truly want? Moving abroad may sound appealing, but it's essential for you to consider whether you prefer a fast-paced environment, which can be very stressful, or a more relaxed lifestyle, which is what I prefer. At this point in my life, as I'm getting a little older, I certainly prefer the latter. And I'm so lucky to be surrounded by the most stunning nature, which is like medicine to me after having a stressful day. And that brings me to point number 4. Reason number 4 is the climate and the breathtaking natural beauty of this country. In Colombia, especially in cities like Medellin, where I live, the weather is comfortably consistent all year round. Although there can be some periods where it's a little warmer and humid, and other periods where it's a little cooler and wetter with more rain. However, the temperatures do not fluctuate very much throughout the year. If you consider a cool night in Medellin to be about 18 degrees, and the average daily temperature throughout the year ranges from around 20 degrees Celsius to around 31 degrees Celsius, which is considered a warm day in Medellin. But for most of the year, the temperature sits around the mid-20s, which is a very comfortable temperature. So if you're from a country like Australia or the US, you can say goodbye to those extreme weather conditions where you have those really freezing cold winters and scorching hot summers. I'm done with them. That's why I love living here in Medellin, because I don't have to deal with that anymore. it's nice, warm, predictable weather all year round. That's why this city, Medellin, is called the City of Eternal Spring. However, if you're going to live in other cities around the country, of course, the weather can be very different. If you're going to live in higher altitude cities, it's going to be cooler, and if you're going to live in lower altitude cities, especially near the coast, it's going to be hotter and tropical. But there really is something for everyone. Now, something for you to consider. If you're considering a big move to another country, think about how important the climate is for you. Does the weather at home impact your mood? It certainly did for me living in Australia. I would always find that the start of autumn and going into winter made me feel very depressed because it was very cold and windy and grey, and it did affect my mood. However, I don't experience that anymore because almost every day is sunny in Medellin, apart from maybe an hour or two of rain. But keep it in mind, in a new country, adjusting to a different climate can be really challenging. Moving on to reason 3, and that is Colombian friendliness and culture. Colombians are incredibly welcoming and very, very kind. They're quick to introduce themselves to you, invite you over for a meal, or lend a hand anytime you're in help. I remember how when I first arrived in Colombia, I felt like an outsider, but Colombians really go out of their way to make you feel part of their family, part of their friend group. And that really made the adjustment so much easier for me, and I'm really grateful for it. And it's one of the main reasons I choose to stay here, because the people are so kind. I think the warmth of Colombians is almost unmatched. I don't think you would find that same warmth and kindness in many other cultures and countries around the world. So I feel very special and very blessed to be here. Be aware, Colombians love to party, and there'll be parties all year round, whether it's for a birthday or for a national holiday, Christmas, New Year. There will be parties and noise for sometimes the whole weekend, sometimes for weeks on end. But Colombians love to party, and I think that's amazing. Now, another point for you to consider, remember that moving to another country means leaving behind your support system, your family, and your friends. And that can be really, really challenging. You will almost inevitably go through some really rough patches as you adjust to a new lifestyle in a new country, especially if you don't know the language. It's normal to go through culture shock, and it's hard to adjust to a new life, new culture, new traditions, new people, new food. A big question to ask yourself, are you ready to build new friendships and connections, knowing it may take some time to adjust? I've lived in both Japan and Colombia, and I can tell you from my personal experience, and this may differ from person to person, but my first 6 months in each of those countries were certainly the most challenging. And especially because in those two countries, I did not know any of the language when I arrived. So it was really hard to adjust, mostly because of the language differences, but also for cultural differences. But I promise you, if you can stick it out for about 6 months, despite the challenges and the ups and downs and all of the adjustments, you're more likely to stay in the country if you can just get through those first 6 months, because they will be the hardest. A lot of people kind of quit because they feel it's too difficult adjusting to a new country with a new language, and they pack up and leave. And when I hear those kind of stories, it makes me feel a little sad, because I feel if you could just stick it out a few more months, maybe around 6 months, you should have a better idea if this is the country you want to stay in or if you want to leave. From my experiences, I found that after about 6 months of being away from my family and friends, all it took was just a short trip home to go and visit my family and friends, and then it kind of took away that homesickness, and then I was just so happy to get back on the plane and go back. For any of you that are struggling in your first few months in a new country, do yourself a favor, try to stick it out for 6 months and then make the decision if you want to stay or go. Now let's talk about reason number 2, cultural differences. The culture here in Colombia is amazing. I find it fascinating. Colombia has a beautiful mix of traditions, food, culture, and many, many celebrations. Colombians have such a rich history and a lot of pride in their culture, and it's been incredible to be able to experience that firsthand. The vibrancy here is contagious, and it's one of the things that makes it so much easier to continue to live here, because it makes life so unique. Colombia has actually been voted twice the happiest country on earth, and it's not really so hard to see why when you see people celebrating and just living the moment. People partying and having fun and dancing and spending time with family and friends. Those are the simple little things that make us really happy. It's not always about being rich and buying expensive items. Sometimes it's the simple things in life that make us the happiest, and Colombians seem to have nailed that. But living in another country has big challenges too, and you will have to ask yourself, are you ready to adapt to a new culture, to new customs, new norms, or maybe even a new language? For me, living in Colombia, I made the choice to learn Spanish because it really has elevated my experience here. It's helped me to fit into the culture more and to meet more people, because the majority of Colombians cannot speak English very well, especially the older generations, but the younger generations are learning English at school, and the general English level in Colombia is improving. But nevertheless, I would recommend learning Spanish if you plan to come and live in Colombia for the long term. And that may apply to whatever country you're planning to move to. Now let's move on to the dreaded number one. And Australians, I'm sorry, this one's going to sting, but I know you're going to understand what I'm talking about, and that is the cost of living. Now, I'm sure this is a situation that is similar in many countries around the world, especially now that we're in this post-pandemic era where prices have just spiraled out of control. Nevertheless, even with massive inflation in Colombia, prices in general are still much cheaper than what I would find in Australia. I'm talking about, on average, about a quarter of the price for most grocery items. So there's no denying it, living in Colombia is far more affordable than Australia, and it's one of the reasons that has kept me here so long, especially in terms of housing, transportation, monthly bills, and general daily expenses. In Australia, even basic grocery costs can take a big chunk of money out of your wallet. As I mentioned, like most grocery items are about 4 times the price of Australia. But here in Colombia, on my salary, I'm able to spend less on those expenses, and I have a little more money that I can enjoy. So I can go out to restaurants more often, I can travel more often. So my quality of life here is actually better than it would be in Australia. Just to compare the cost of living, when I was living in Sydney over a decade ago, I would not have been able to afford a 3-bedroom apartment like I have here in Colombia, in Medellin. The average rental price for a property, an apartment, I would say is about between 4 to 6 times the price of what I would pay in Colombia. For example, the amount that I pay for this 3-bedroom apartment here in Colombia, which is not a luxurious apartment, but it's very comfortable. This is 3-bedroom apartment, but if I was in Sydney, I would not even be able to get a 1-bedroom apartment for the same price I pay here for a month, for a single week. Sydney housing prices are a little out of control, and it's one of the hardest things to adjust to when you move to Australia, especially if you want to live in Sydney. So this affordability has given me more freedom to enjoy life, and to me that is a better quality of life. And stick around to the end, because I'm going to show you a little cost comparison of some very common grocery items like bread and milk and so on, and I'll show you the prices in Colombia compared to the prices in Australia. I think you're going to be horrified. So of course, the cost of living is important. So it is worth asking yourself this question: what are your financial goals for moving abroad? Will you need to work, or will you need to find a job that pays well? Will the job market meet your needs? Do you have the qualifications that will be necessary for those jobs? On the other hand, if you were to move to Colombia, would you be able to find a job with your qualifications and skills with a comparable salary? Because chances are you probably wouldn't, because the salaries are often 6 to 10 times lower than what you would expect in Australia. So that's something to keep in mind if you want to come to Colombia, for example, or to many other countries like Latin America or many Asian countries. These are big questions to consider before making the move. Now, my last point is just some general information for foreigners who are planning to go and live in a developed country like the USA, Australia, UK, and so on. As someone that grew up in Australia and I've lived in Japan and Colombia, it is true to say that sometimes the grass isn't greener on the other side. It's simply not what you're expecting. My experiences in Japan were mostly amazing, but not everything is what I was expecting. There were some challenges there as well. Fortunately, Colombia is a different culture where it's a little easier to settle in, and those lower costs of living certainly helped adjust to this country much more easily. If you're thinking about making a move to any country in the world, ask yourself these questions. What do you want from your life in this new country? Are you prepared to face the cultural differences, the distance from your loved ones, or different work conditions? Have you considered the higher cost of living in some developed countries? Perhaps a more stricter way of life and more rules, especially in the workplace, the language barrier, especially if you don't speak the local language fluently, and troubles integrating into the local society. Those are just a few of the challenges that you may face. But depending on the country you move to, some of the positives may include a better quality of life, living in a safer country with lower crime rates, better job opportunities that pay well, and a great, safe environment for raising a family. So you'll have to weigh up the pros and cons to see if living abroad really is the right thing for you. So wrapping up and back to my personal story, for now I'm still very, very happy living in Colombia. I've been here for 12 years. Time has flown by, and I still really, really love it. As for if I will return to Australia, it really is a 50-50. I love my country. I love going home. I love catching up with family and friends. I love the nature. I love so much about it. But the longer you are out of a country, the harder it can be to come home. Because when I consider how easy my life here is in Colombia and having to go back to Australia where, number one, the cost of living changes so much, it's a hard decision to make. I have a feeling I'll probably go back to Australia to retire, but certainly not in the near future, because I have my two beautiful little doggies who I will never, ever, ever abandon. I'm here with them until the end. So for as long as they're here, I'm here, and I'm considering getting a Colombian citizenship as well, because I would like to have the opportunity to have more rights, to be able to vote, to open a business, to buy property, things like that. And by having a dual citizenship, it gives me the option to live in both Australia and Colombia. So that's a really big benefit.
And as I mentioned earlier, here is a rough price comparison of some common grocery items in Australia and Colombia. I've converted these prices to US dollars. Of course, prices can vary greatly from store to store, so these are just rough estimates of 2024 prices.
Thanks so much for watching, guys. As always, I really appreciate it. Let me know in the comments, what country are you interested in moving to and why? And what do you think will be some of the pros and the cons of living in that country? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, that really helps this video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with your friends. Those little gestures really help a small channel like mine to grow, and I really, really appreciate it. Until next time, see you in the next one.